The American people are entitled to know when a foreign power is attempting to exploit our country's free exchange of ideas in order to send around its own propaganda. In the wake of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, RT's editor-in-chief said the company had built, quote, an entire empire of covert projects designed to shape public opinion in Western audiences. We allege that as part of that effort, RT and its employees, including the defendants, implemented a nearly $10 million scheme to fund and direct a Tennessee-based company to publish and disseminate content deemed favorable to the Russian government. To implement this scheme, the defendants directed the company to contract with U.S.-based social media influencers to share this content on their platforms. The subject matter and content of many of the videos published by the company were often consistent with Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its ongoing war in Ukraine. The company never disclosed to the influencers or to their millions of followers its ties to RT and the Russian government. Instead, the defendants and the company claimed that the company was sponsored by a private investor, but that private investor was a fictitious persona. The charges unsealed this morning do not represent the end of the investigation. It remains active and ongoing.
So it turns out that some of the biggest names in right-wing media, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, just to name a few, were all licensing content to a shell company that essentially was set up by Russian agents to influence American politics and America's foreign policy as it pertains to Ukraine. Now, in that clip, you heard Attorney General Merrick Garland making it clear that the Department of Justice is charging 2 employees of Russia Today with violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, saying that they participated in a, quote, $10 million scheme to create and distribute content to U.S. audiences with hidden Russian government messaging. Now, while the media company that has been identified, Tenet Media, is not named in the indictment, there's a trail of evidence that shows that this is exactly the company that the Department of Justice is implicating, as well as Tim Pool and Benny Johnson came out directly and addressed it with their own statements on social media, saying that they were victims, stating that they had no idea that the company that they were taking $100,000 per episode from was funneling money to them from Russia, despite the fact that their content was explicitly in favor of Russia. Listen to this clip of Tim Pool, who received $100,000 per episode to do this work. Listen to his commentary on the Ukraine war.
This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. They are expanding this war. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do. Ukraine is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, triggering this conflict. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
There has been a definitive shift in Republican orthodoxy and Republican policy as it pertains to Russia. Many years ago, it would be unthinkable for anyone in this nation to usurp the foreign policy that has been set by the President of the United States and to do so on behalf of Vladimir Putin, specifically Russia, generally speaking. But now we have influencers, media commentators, so-called journalists who have directly aligned themselves with Vladimir Putin. And it would be one thing if their arguments were genuine, but they are extremely vapid and disingenuous. They are arguments, and they have been arguments since the invasion of Ukraine. These right-wing influencers, who now we know have been receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode, They have been forwarding some of the most ridiculous arguments in favor of Russia's position, essentially saying that the thing to do is to lay down your arms and to allow Vladimir Putin to just have his way with you.
What's your opinion on the solution to the Ukraine war?
Cut off the money. It's the only way you get them to the table, right? As long as, we're literally creating the oligarch class of billionaire in Ukraine with whatever's being siphoned off, whether it's Zelensky, whether it's this, while they send young men to die as cannon fodder on the front lines because they couldn't care less. My father would have been like, hey, you got like one more month of this, and if you're not at the table, it's done. Yeah. Guess what? Zelensky wouldn't have a chance if we shut it down. So he'd come to the table, and they'd come up with something.
Absolutely.
And now we know with certainty that many of these individuals were being paid handsomely to hold these opinions. And whether or not they held these opinions genuinely, they were being paid to disseminate these opinions to their millions of followers across the United States of America. And it wasn't just the issue of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's also the issue of all of the divisive politics, the wedge issues, the issues that have been continuously destabilizing the United States of America, destabilizing our ability to maintain a healthy and functioning democracy. Vladimir Putin has had a vested interest in making sure that there are divisive voices that are destroying our democracy. We saw this exact pattern in the lead up to the invasion of Ukraine. There were right-wing influencers in Ukraine who were making money peddling Russian propaganda. And as soon as the invasion happened, those voices, like many others, got up and left and took refuge in Russia while their nation was being invaded by Vladimir Putin. This is the same MO that Vladimir Putin has been using for many, many years. We simply cannot overstate how damning this information is and how very clear it is that we have a party and an entire faction here in the United States that has been co-opted by Russia, by Vladimir Putin, for the purposes of forwarding Vladimir Putin's agenda at the expense of the United States of America. And I wonder if any of the people who listen to these guys are going to really take stock, take an assessment of what they believe as a result of what their favorite YouTuber has been paid a ridiculous amount of money to tell them. Right? Do you think that these people who listen to Tim Pool are all of a sudden going to pause and reflect and say, he was being paid $100,000 an episode to tell me this. Maybe I should reconsider what I believe. No, what we're seeing is the same thing that we see all the time when Republicans, when MAGA gets confronted with reality, with truth, with information, they don't change. They double down because I guess it's too embarrassing for them to admit that they have been duped, that they have been suckers for Vladimir Putin paid propagandists. Vladimir Putin has invested wisely and it has paid off. Because now you have half of the United States of America, or at least those who participate in politics, who think that Ukraine is the enemy, who think that Vladimir Putin is their savior, who align first and foremost, not America first, but Putin first. Millions of people who hang on these idiots' every words, now recycling all of those same talking points. And they're saying it now on social media. These followers are doggedly attacking anyone who holds an opinion differently than what Vladimir Putin has paid their favorite YouTuber to tell them. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe to this channel, Really American, where we have been calling out this propaganda long before the indictment from the Department of Justice.